Setting the tweak on a 12 scale is a fairly difficult and delicate task, and there's pros and cons to every method, but I'll explain the method that I use to set a tweak and by the use of this tool, the Hoodie Quick Tweak Station. So before we put the car on the tweak station, we need to make sure that we have even front droop. I've done a separate video on setting the front droop earlier, so you can refer to that video on how to set the front droop, but just double check. It's 3.4 ride height on both sides and 0.6 millimeters of droop. We need to do this before we put the car on the tweak board. I've also set the ride height at the rear of the car. Everything's set up and ready to tweak. There's several methods you can use to tweak the car. I prefer to use the Hoodie Quick Tweak Station, which I'll just show you in the next step. But you can also use the coin method, where you put one coin on each wheel and you lift the car from the center of the chassis to see which coin falls down first. This method works as well and is pretty quick to use, but I feel that using the tweak board is a more precise way to set the tweak, and that's why I always use this method before every run. What is also important to do before you put the car on the tweak station is to preset the preload of the side springs. So if you put a brand new car together, make sure that you set the side springs to be slightly touching against the pod plate on both sides, so that you have a starting point for the tweak process. About the side spring preload, I generally recommend to run barely any or just a slight amount of preload. That's the best basic setting for most conditions. You can experiment by using a softer side spring with more preload versus a stiffer side spring with less preload. The benefit you'll have of more preload is that the car will be reacting quicker to steering input. So as soon as you turn the wheel or the stick, the car will turn. But sometimes too much preload will make the car lose high speed and middle corner steering. So it's simply a matter of experimentation, and you need to work with the preload to see what sort of setting you prefer, also depending on the track condition. Generally, on higher grip, higher bite tracks, like for example on CRC black carpet, you can get away with more side spring preload without making the car unstable or losing the rear. But in general, with the kit side springs, I recommend barely any preload, just for the springs to touch the carbon plate. So remember to set them to just touch before you put them on the tweak station. I'll put the tweak station together like this. We need to make sure that first of all the surface is level that we're going to use. So you have to check the bubble here, and it seems to be level enough for us to tweak the car on it. But I then set the rear part of the tweak board to be straight with the surface, so you have to do this every time that you put a tweak board together. The bubble is in line, means it's ready to go. You need to line up the car within the pre-marked lines on the tweak board, right where it's at 171 millimeters in this case at the back, and the front should be 168, 169 ish, depending on the offset of your wheels and the offset of the wheel axle that you're running. Just put a car in there. Then you need to look at the bubble. So when we have the car on the tweak board, I usually try to see first of all if the bubble centers. Sometimes it's hard to see when you use a softer spring and when you don't use a lot of spring preload. So what I then usually try to do is I try to push each side with the same amount of pressure to see how the bubble centers from each side. In this case, it's already pretty even. But if I would change something, I would probably stiffen the left side spring a little bit to make the bubble center better from this side. So you always have to think about it as a cross movement. Like the lift of the left wheel is related to the right side spring and vice versa. So you always have to do it in a cross adjustment, and it's always a very fine adjustment. In this case, I'm gonna loosen this a little bit and tighten the other side. You can see that the bubble is actually very close to center now that the car rests, but I would probably still take out a little bit of preload from this side to help the bubble move towards the right on the gauge. So that's how you set the tweak. It's really important that you push the car down a couple times for the bubble to center. And as I said, depending on the stiffness of side spring that you use, you will need to find a way to see how the bubble returns from each side. By some practice, you'll find a way that you can see this clearly, and you'll be able to set the tweak perfectly every time. I still prefer this over the coin trick because I feel that it's more precise.